Bonjour. Hello, Waiche. Welcome to this plenary discussion this afternoon, and thank you very much for attending. But before I get started, I'd first like to acknowledge that I am joining the forum while visiting Ottawa, our nation's capital, and that I'm on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, who has resided here for time immemorial. And I honor their long history of welcoming many people to this beautiful territory. I also want to acknowledge that our panelists come from many different areas of this country, and if they choose, they can acknowledge the land on which they are residing or attending this forum after I introduce them. This forum is to inspire and motivate young people to pursue careers in the resource sector and empowering them to become involved and to help transform it. And without much more discussion, I'm going to get right into it because we don't have a whole lot of time. I would like to, first of all, talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to be discussing this afternoon. So we are going to be talking about Indigenous communities and peoples, their original customs for their traditional lands, how they have a key role in sustainable resource development as stakeholders and partners in these projects and bringing their unique perspectives to the sector. We know from many projects where Indigenous communities have participated in resource development on their traditional lands that these projects succeed in several ways. First, it provides community leaders and members an opportunity to discuss the development plans and put their mark on it to ensure that these projects have a lasting impact and a minimal disturbance to their lands and to their traditions. It protects the natural environment, but also ensures that participating communities will benefit directly from these opportunities. We know that the mining industry is having challenges filling these positions in operations across the country and globally, and a skilled workforce is in greater demand today than in any recent memory. But what can be done to introduce opportunities for work or business development for Indigenous youth that can provide a skilled, knowledgeable workforce today and far into the future? How do proponents of future projects working in partnership with community and business leaders build awareness for youth to see opportunities with these projects? We are fortunate to have 5 experienced and knowledgeable individuals who will bring a unique perspective to this area. I will read a short introduction of each panelist to ensure that they will have more time to share their views and perspectives. Their full bio is on the notes about this session, so to read more about them, please go to that part of the program. Each panelist will have 2 to 2.5 minutes to present their opening remarks. Then we will go into the question stage where each panelist will have an opportunity to answer a series of questions that I'll be asking. To get started, I will begin with Lana Eagle. Lana is a consultant helping exploration and mining companies navigate engagement and reconciliation when working with Indigenous communities. She is one of the first Indigenous women to chair the board of a junior mining company. Lana, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Glenn, for the kind introduction. I first want to acknowledge that I'm calling you today from the city of Vancouver, which is located in the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. So it's my pleasure to be with you this morning. You're certainly not the youngest group of people that I've spoken to. I did have to make a presentation last year to grade 4s, learning about, what is reconciliation and how do we move forward in this industry. Canada is changing. I think many of you are well aware of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation that just occurred on September 30th. And it was last year, after the discovery of unmarked graves in Canada, that Canada really woke up. And so many people from different industries, from different walks of life, were contacting me and wondering, what can I do? What can I do to acknowledge Indigenous people better? And I think we've seen that movement happen in the mineral exploration and mining industry for the past few years, but it's certainly been given more attention because of the work that's taken place so far. And in 2019, in December, maybe it was November, but it was the end of 2019, before the pandemic, when BC adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act. And then Canada followed later in 2021, in June. So we are at that crossroads right now where both BC and Canada are still working to align their laws and their acts, to the values of Indigenous peoples. Well, what does that really mean? I think what's happening across this country is that Indigenous people are gaining a voice because of these acts. And because of that, it's a little more challenging if you're not really wanting to build those relationships in a truthful way and work with Indigenous people. I think you'll be found out pretty quickly. So I'm going to leave my comments there. I'm pretty sure that's within the 2.5 minutes. But I just want to say that, it is my pleasure right now to work with communities on the ground in northern Manitoba, in BC, and Quebec, and working with individuals in the mining industry who are learning how to build that trust at the very outset, and how important early engagement is to build that relationship and to move forward. So thank you, Glenn, and I look forward to hearing my other colleagues' opening comments.
Thank you, Lana. And right on time. Very good. Next, I want to introduce Paul Gunner. Paul has had a long history of working with Indigenous companies across Canada's north. Presently, Paul is the president and CEO of Tahltan Nation Development Corporation. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate that. Got my little timer on here, so I can keep in that 2.5 minutes. I'm calling in from traditional territory for Yellowknife's Dene First Nations. I just got back to Yellowknife this morning, but I bounced back between here and the traditional territory of the Tahltan Nation, which is in northwestern BC. As you said, I've had a long history, and in the last 2 corporations I've been with, I've been very fortunate to be directly within the mining space, something that I'm personally very passionate about. And I just want to sort of highlight a couple of those key points or highlights that I've sort of seen over the last number of years. And as I always like to tell people, I'm a practitioner. So I'm in the trenches and sort of rolling up the sleeves. So now during my time, when I was with Deton Show with Yellowknife's Dene First Nations, we were able to build the largest Indigenous-based logistics company in the country. Sort of managing all the back end for those diamond mines that take place, which is a large industry here in Northwest Territories. And at the same time, also participated in developing Canada's first rare earth project, right? Which the Yellowknife's Dene First Nations took a big lead on. And I believe we were the first Indigenous miners on our own traditional land. And if I fast forward to today, where I'm at with Tahltan Nation Development Corporation, which is an incredibly progressive group working in northwestern BC, in an area that I think a lot of people would know as the Golden Triangle, you really see a nation that's leaning in and not only helping to advance and enhance the industry itself, but developing their own plan forward in terms of self-determination and economic reconciliation. So if you go back a little bit in time, it wasn't that long ago when the region had a fairly high unemployment rate. Fast forward to today, we can't find a Tahltan member because they're all gainfully employed. It's a really incredible turnaround story, and really started by the founder Jerry Asp and many other very strong Tahltan members that built up the corporation over time. And it's not just all about making money and developing sort of the the employment opportunities, but they're also advancing things like the fiber project as we connect those communities. So we're building that right now, and as a result of that, being able to light up both communities and industry, and working through and developing the regional airport, where we've been able to meaningfully bring down the time it takes for medical to leave the area under emergency situations. So just a couple of really quick examples to start us off of 2 nations, I think, that are really advancing, developing, and bringing forward within the resource sector. Thank you.
Next is JP Gladu. JP is from the Bingwe Anishinaabe, located in northwestern Ontario, north of Thunder Bay. He led the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business for more than half a dozen years. I think it's closer to 8 years, before starting his consulting firm, Makwate, a consulting firm specializing in business development. And JP has a long history of the sector. JP, please take it away.
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to always follow my friends Paul and Lana, and Glenn, thank you for stepping into this moderator role. I think we've been here a number of times together. It's always great to have your leadership. Thank you. I'm on my reserve today, Sandpoint, or Bingwe Anishinaabe. A lot of my work has been quite national, actually, and I've sat on a board, Noront, before it became the Ring of Fire company, which Glenn sits on. Paul's an old boss of mine. He's still on the board of the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and I've been able to cross paths with Lana numerous times and watch her leadership from an Indigenous woman's perspective here in Canada and how it intersects with the mining sector. I continue to do actually quite a bit of work in the mining sector by sitting on boards and advocating for meaningful inclusion of Indigenous people, and we'll get more into what that inclusion actually looks like. A big part of my work and continued passion is around the Indigenous inclusion, around the economy and economic reconciliation, and how we can formulate better approaches and stronger outcomes as a result. A lot of my work as well is sitting on governance, quite frankly, is a big part of the work that I do nationally as a Suncor board member, as a Institute for Corporate Directors board member as well. I'm always pushing corporations to do more, to think broader, to be more inclusive with our Indigenous communities, to make sure that we've got those stronger outcomes that we all are striving for. And when we look at the younger generation of people coming up, I tell you, like I deliberately got out of the city of Toronto, and I deliberately made the move to Northern Ontario, and I deliberately sit here in a community of about 20 people or so, 2 hours from Thunder Bay, because the natural environment is incredibly special. And finding the balance between conservation and land issues, and in Canada, we're talking as Indigenous people what land back looks like. And again, really it's about the meaningful inclusion of our people in everything that the mining sector does, from workforce development to mining to reclamation to decommissioning, everything. And it's a really exciting place to be, and I'm thrilled to be here. So Glenn, thank you very much.
Wow. So far, you guys are nailing the timing right on. Thank you for your cooperation on this. We're going to go over to Laura Clinton. Laura is the Executive Director of Mining Matters, a Canadian charity focused on delivering knowledge and awareness about Canada's geology and mineral resources to students, educators, and the public. Laura, please.
Thanks very much, Glenn. It's a privilege to be here today. I'm speaking to you from Toronto, which is situated on the ancestral lands and territories of the Anishinaabe Nation, which includes the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. In our work at Mining Matters, we've had the great privilege to work with and learn from and partner with many Indigenous communities, and so it's a great pleasure to be here today. As a national charitable organization, Mining Matters aims to inspire young people from kindergarten to grade 12 to learn about earth sciences, the minerals industry, and their roles in society. And we have extensive resources and workshops available for teachers nationwide that provide their students with current information about rocks, minerals, metals, and mining, and the diverse career opportunities available in the minerals industry. We also reach students directly through workshops and camps tailored to their particular locales. And Mining Matters was established back in 1994. We've reached an estimated 825,000 teachers, youth, and members of the public across Canada since inception. So our programs, back in 2002, this is when Mining Matters really began its focused efforts to deliver workshops to Indigenous youth in partnership with communities, industry, and government. And in our first year, we visited Cambridge Bay. We delivered 1 week-long program for youth in grades 6 to 8. And 20 years later, we've really expanded those programs. Prior to the pandemic, we were invited to more than 40 communities, reaching thousands of youth. We work closely with community leaders and school administrators to deliver multi-day programs that involve youth and hands-on inquiry-based activities. While we're in communities, teachers receive curriculum linked to classroom resources and professional development. And we always make sure that not only teachers and education assistants, but all school staff and community leaders and community members at large are, invited to attend our programs. While in communities, we also love to host evening events for friends and family of the youth that are participating in our programs at the school, so that they can experience some of our hands-on activities and share their knowledge of the local geology. Whenever possible, we try to involve career role models from industry to share their stories of their personal education and career paths. In our programs, we work with education experts, Indigenous education experts, to develop some of our activities and lead our team in professional development. And we're also really proud to provide some of our resources in Ojibwe, Ojikree, Cree, Inuktitut, and Inuinnaqtun as well. So, so a little bit of a different perspective here on the education from K to 12, but I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks very much, Glenn.
Thank you, Laura. And what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the question and answer part of the session. I will now ask specific questions of each panelist by name. However, if other panelists want to add to the discussion, please feel free to join in. And as a reminder, try to keep your questions as succinct as possible, so that we can try to get as much information out of you that we can. So with the first question I have here, and it's going to Lana, JP, and Paul, but as I said before, Laura, if you want to join in at any time, please feel free. The first question: what critical guidance can Indigenous communities provide to help ensure sustainable development takes place in a more robust and enduring manner? So one of you can jump in, please.
I'll start. I think that, what's really important is that level of trust begins to build right from the very beginning, because I think it's challenging to expect that a community is going to start saying, this is how it's going to work, if they don't trust the other party in the room. So building trust comes from a very human part of who we are, an ability to listen, an ability to be concerned about the things that concern the communities. So for example, in my work now in Northern Manitoba, there isn't a really strong relationship with the provincial government, and there especially isn't a strong relationship with Manitoba Hydro. So that is the context that we are coming into the community with. And so they, are having to work at believing that we are who we are, and that we are honest people that want to find a way to make the relationship work. And then I think if we refrain from using words like sustainability and words that may be totally not understandable from the outset, I think we have to be able to talk in a way that we can understand each other. And then from there, once they trust us, it's amazing the kind of information that we can learn, and we know then what kinds of things we need to address. I think that in the end serves to help projects become more sustainable from the very get-go.
Paul, do you want to hop in next?
Sure. I was looking at you, but yes, absolutely. So I think, from a little bit of a different stance, and I generally will come from the business side of it and economic development side. It's, I think, starting off by clearly understanding the community in terms of, capacity, where they're at in terms of their own business journey or business cycle. And then determining exactly at Alana's point, that trust element that comes into it, and helping them sort of navigate and build up over time to have meaningful participation within whatever projects, right? So whether that be at the exploration phase, construction, if a project's going to go forward into operations, etc., there's always opportunities where communities can really get involved. What I've sort of seen in the past is if you wait too long in that journey, often the communities will miss out on really getting that meaningful or that gainful opportunity. So by having them really come in at that forefront and building that capacity and bringing that mentorship, training, development, wherever they need to have that active participation, that really brings them forward where there can be really wholesome involvement, that participation, that trust, that all starts to get interwoven within that. And then you can build up throughout the life cycle of those projects. And then the ultimate goal being is it's not project specific. You've got communities that have the ability to go forward and to build their own capacity outside of singular projects or the mining space in particular. JP, you have anything to add to that?
Well, those are two great answers, fully expected for sure. I purposely laid out a little bit of the groundwork around governance. I know some folks, when you start talking about governance, they start to get a glossy look in their eyes. But fundamentally, governance from our communities, governance from a corporate point of view is fundamental. It's actually the CEOs who report to the directors. So the importance of having Indigenous directors on any kind of land-based company is absolutely fundamental. And when I was thinking about the words that you put out there, Glenn, robust and enduring. If we look at the way that a corporation manages its governance and the way they do the reporting is quarterly, right? Every quarter, what are your returns? What are your risks? What are the issues? What's the business plan? Are we aligning with the business plan? What are the shareholders thinking? When you think about an Indigenous governance systems, it's 7 generations, not these every 3 months, quarters. It's just, there's such a misalignment of that. And when you think about the shareholder base, anybody on this screen can invest in a publicly traded company. The shareholder is really incredibly diverse. But if you think about the shareholder from an Indigenous corporation, which is held in trust by the First Nation or the Métis or Inuit organization, the shareholders are the community members. And the community members are thinking 7 generations. And so when they direct and influence the company through their shares, which is basically from an Indigenous perspective, their chief and council, I'm going to elect you or I'm not because I don't believe in your leadership, or I do, that has a significant impact in the way that the company behaves and operates. Yes, they report on quarterly, but their longer term vision is 7 generations. So when you bring the Indigenous people to a Western context, there's incredible learnings for both because we're thinking about enduring. This is 7 generations. We're thinking about being more robust. Well, what better way to have a more robust system by having the people that have been on the land for thousands of years to make sure that we're doing it right. So governance systems, I believe, have a lot to learn from each other. And as an Indigenous director sitting on Indigenous boards in the past and sharing them to corporations, I tell you, there is learnings for both to be had.
Excellent, excellent question or answers to the question. Very covered a large area of information. Laura, did you have anything you would like to add?
Well, my perspective is, really from that K-12 sort of education experience, and from our perspective, it's really important, the listening, the learning, the changing, to meet the needs of communities and getting the input from community leaders, from schools and from youth. What is engaging, what is working, really looking at the feedback and adapting our programs to meet their needs.
The second question is, are there better ways for the resource sector to effectively engage with Indigenous communities? Maybe we can shake up the order a bit, and I'll start off with Paul this time.
Certainly. So, I mean, are there better ways to engage? So, we often talk about starting early, and being very early in the process. So I think that's just a given, right? I don't think that's something that we really need to hash on, or at least I hope we don't in today's current age. But again, I want to sort of circle back in terms of more on that business side. I think the opportunity really is then identifying, where do you want to engage and what do you want to participate in terms of the business opportunities. And the one I want to highlight is key infrastructure. because there's always opportunities where Indigenous groups can bring in, have equity stakes or positions or opportunities. And the one that really stands out for me, which I really enjoy telling a bit of this story, is when the electrification took place up Highway 37 into the Golden Triangle. And that was, 10, 15 years ago now. Tall Tans were actively participating in that, and they've got an active impact benefit agreement through that project. But they also have an equity position in that project today, right? So not only do they help develop it, not only do they help maintain it, but there's also that ownership piece. Well, as a result of that electrification, here we are in a modern world of decarbonizing the world that we reside in today. That now has become a really key infrastructure that they're participating in. And as a result of that, if you look at the Brucejack mine owned by Newcrest, they recently acquired that earlier in the year. That is now the lowest GHG emissions per ounce produced in all of Canada and Australia, right? So it's a very, very green mine. And when we look at the jurisdiction now that we're developing because of some of that key infrastructure, as a result of that, you're going to have similar projects that have that very low carbon footprint, right? So I think, outside of that conversation of engaging early, it's also really important, again, to highlight what are those initiatives, the key infrastructure, the opportunities that are multi-generational, that we can get those real successes where we're bringing nations, communities, and industry together for the greater purpose and the value.
Sorry about that. Excellent, Paul. So JP, we'll go over to you.
Yeah, Paul, I'm really glad you brought up ESG and green. What's driving that, quite frankly, are our young people going, man, oh man, you guys have kind of got us off the right track here. We got to get back on, and that engagement piece of an Indigenous worldview is really important. One of the things that I've been encouraging executives to do and managers is to get out to our communities more often. One of the things that kind of bothers me a little bit is, one, I have to go to Toronto. Two, I'm glad you like that, Paul. Two is that, like, these executives, I get invited to all sorts of executive meetings, boardrooms, etc. And I go, you're going to get the same message from me there as you would out here for the most part, but you're going to experience my community. You're going to experience my culture. I'll probably feed you some moose meat, take you out fishing. We can go visit another community just south of my First Nation. But the whole experience is going to be authentic. If you really want to understand our communities, you're not going to really understand us from your boardroom. Get out of your boardrooms and come and visit our communities. That's, if you're going to effectively engage, you got to come and see us. And, all the other things, you're absolutely right. Hopefully we're not talking about engaging early anymore. You're absolutely right. There's table stakes to that. But as the Creator said, or we say about the Creator, Creator gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you speak. Come into our communities with no agenda except to build trust that Lana talked about. And, and have a conversation about values. Forget about the business right now, because if you can't align on your values, you're not going to have a business. Sometimes values don't align with companies. And if they don't, have the heart-to-heart conversation and go, we're not aligned here. We're going to have to find a different partner. Or we are aligned. Now let's talk about how we're going to work together. But again, come to our communities. I love taking people out fishing, and each and every one of you are invited.
Okay, see you on the weekend. Laura.
Well, I love that approach of going to communities, and certainly that's something that we really treasure. It's the best part of my job, going into communities and working with youth, working with community leaders and learning from elders. And we hold that philosophy very close to our hearts, to listen and learn. And we're there, to share some of our knowledge, and we're there to learn from the knowledge of others. And the experience of being in communities is some of the best experiences of my life. So yeah, agreed.
And we'll now go with Lana.
Sure. What I have to comment on would have probably been something that Laura could have built on, and it's really around education. I think there's tremendous opportunity out there right now. There's so many Canadians that want to learn more about how can we work together, how can we be inclusive of Indigenous peoples. This afternoon, I'm lecturing at UBC to a 500 level mining class called Indigenous peoples and mining, and I will be talking on the subject of truth and reconciliation. Now, after 3 hours, I don't know how much I'll be talking, but it really is an opportunity to dialogue with university level students who are taking their mining engineering courses, but UBC has integrated this into their overall requirements for graduating from mining engineering. So I think it's really positive. I think we see academia, we see mining companies moving in that direction, you know, prior to any legislation. So I think there are a lot of really good actors out there, and we just have to follow, you know, what they're doing properly. They may not have termed it, you know, truth and reconciliation, ESG, or any of those buzzwords, you know, prior to these last couple of years, but they are starting to understand how important this is to move forward.
Great, thank you, Lana. I'm going to ask a follow-up with Laura and her group, Mining Matters, just to explain a little bit more. I really liked, you know, the theme of JP and Paul and Laura's and Lana's comments about you know, going into the communities or going to the source to get the information, because I think that's critical to the success of companies when they want to work with communities. But Laura, what is Mining Matters' formula for creating programs that successfully build mineral literacy?
So I think for us, there's really not a magic formula or a one-size-fits-all approach. You know, in Canada, there's so many organizations that are so strongly committed to providing accurate information and opportunities to educators, students, and the general public on the value of the minerals and mining sector to our society, and our industry's, you know, commitment to corporate social responsibility, of course, a vast array of related careers. But I think for us, we've been successful because we've been adaptable, and again, listening and learning and changing to meet the needs of our community partners has been really really important. And we do have a few sort of key rules that we follow. Of course, our activities are fun and engaging and hands-on for the youth, but we scaffold the content so that we can return to communities year after year without repeating the content. You know, we expand our career information as students advance to include a resource called Guiding Circles. You know, it's a curriculum that's been designed to take participants through a process of self-reflection and a career exploration and decision-making, and it's a holistic approach that includes traditional Indigenous worldview and also contemporary sort of career development concepts, and helps participants really identify values and, you know, options and move towards a career path. So that importance of making it hands-on, getting out into the land, you know, having those hands-on samples and scaffolding the content to really, you know, build the foundational information year after year. Our instructors, you know, our instructors are an incredible team of early career professionals and students in geology, environmental science, and sustainability. For young people listening today, you know, I encourage you to consider volunteering in a classroom. You know, you bring tremendous value as role models. And of course, career role models from the community and from industry, you know, provide tremendous value and impact by sharing their love of what they do and their career path and their knowledge. You know, they really enforce the importance of school and highlight the vast range of career opportunities. And teachers and students alike really love to interact with the expert. And, you know, we know that role models really love the experience as well and find it tremendously rewarding. Another key factor for us is that our resources are developed by teachers for teachers, and we engage Indigenous education experts to provide us with their expert knowledge on our resources. You know, our partners in industry and government and academia review our resources for technical accuracy, but we really engage teachers, because teachers know what teachers need. And so, they need lesson plans and they need hands-on rock and mineral samples. I mean, we're providing that foundational knowledge and information. They need access to field trips and that sort of thing. And so, we recognize that a lot of teachers don't have a background in earth science. And so we really try to build in the training and provide them with all of the tools that they need to deliver that earth science curriculum with confidence.
Okay.
And
great, Laura. I'm gonna move on. Thanks for that. I'm cognizant of the time, so I'm going to ask Paul and Lana and JP this next question. Could resource companies, Indigenous communities, educational institutions, and government do a better job at helping young Indigenous people enter careers in this sector?
Glenn, I'll also chime in to say that there's two optional comments from our audience members, if there's time at the end.
Yes, I see that. We'll have this answers now.
It's a great. JP, do you want to go first?
Sure, Paul. Thanks. I mean, these are great questions. Thanks, man. That actually tie into your question, Glenn. One of them, just for everybody's sake, is what skill sets are important to the industries for Indigenous youth to be more valuable in the roles, as well as the demand. The Indigenous youth is demanding change. How do we actually connect more Indigenous and non-Indigenous people together to build a better world? Those are fantastic questions. And then you compile that with Glenn's question. We need to see ourselves in faces of success. We need to see ourselves in the case studies. We need to see ourselves in the front lines. We need to see ourselves on the executive. I mean, mining companies have to make more room for our people to make sure that we see ourselves in those companies in which they're trying to attract. We don't want to be in places where we don't see ourselves. That's a very intimidating place for anybody to be, never mind an Indigenous youth. When it comes to the opportunity to, I'm losing my train of thought just for a second, making sure that when we've got Indigenous youth that we fully support them. And one of the ways that I've been seeing this is the steps leading up to going to a program like it's called the Outland Youth Employment Program, where we bring Indigenous youth together to learn about all aspects of natural resources, about personal hygiene, about getting your driver's license, about CV building, resume building, all these core elements which helps make a person successful in the workforce. We need those. And then what I want to see more of is actually bringing non-Indigenous youth up to our northern communities so that they can experience, just to my earlier comment about bringing executives, we should be bringing non-Indigenous youth to our communities to work with our Indigenous youth in our territories, in our circumstances. Paul Martin, our former Prime Minister, talks about this all the time. He reflects so strongly and warmly about his time up in the territories, working with young Indigenous men side by side with them in the boats. That experience just enriched his entire life, and he became Prime Minister. We don't know who the next Prime Minister is going to be or business leader is going to be. We need to make sure that the youth are connecting in our communities and forming those really crucial relationships, because you don't know where those relationships will lead.
Thank you. Paul.
100%. Always love hearing JP's messaging. So, I mean, when you look at, what can we be doing better? Where are we engaging? I mean, we've got two phenomenal leaders between JP and Lana with us today that are sitting at the top on boards and leaning in on this stuff, right? So, we're doing some of this today. We got to do more of it. Absolutely, right? When we look at what's taking place in Alaska, and full disclosure, I've certainly taken some of my learnings from the state and looking at some of the resource projects there. We've got, of the 10 largest private businesses in Alaska, 9 of them are Indigenous. And of those 9, a lot of them are directly involved within the mining space. Their leadership team are representative of their communities, are Indigenous within the mines themselves, with the oil and gas and the energy sectors, et cetera. So we know that these things are happening. We're probably, maybe in Canada, a generation or so behind. But, I personally think that we're going in the right direction, and we got to keep pushing and making that a reality, right? It's important for our young people, our youth, to understand that, in particular, the mineral sector is part of the solution. right? We should be proud. We should be proud to be part of that, right? When we look at a decarbonized world, when we look at electrifying, when we look at bringing in rare earths, copper, lithium, etc., you know, the technology space, the ability to have electric vehicles, etc., all of that has to be mined, right? And the more that we can get meaningfully involved in that within our communities and building up those skill sets at the very top, and it's not just about being right directly in the mine themselves, the corporate jobs, all the support services, all the entrepreneurship opportunities, etc., all of that gets wrapped up into it. And it's such a fun, exciting, explosive space to be in. And I'm personally really excited for our Indigenous youth and the future that they can have by participating. But, you know, to your point, all of us have to lean in on this stuff, support it, and build that up and make Canada #1 in terms of that ethical resource extraction space. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Lana.
Yeah, I totally agree with JP and with Paul about what they've said. What I'd like to add, I think, is we have to have courage to be intentional. And what I mean by that is, you know, how do we provide these opportunities for our youth? Is it through Mining Matters? Which, you know, the answer, of course, is yes. But I look back at the most recent PDAC conference, and the Tahltan sent a contingency of youth to the conference to learn more about our industry. And they have been sending a contingency of youth to Roundup, which is another major conference that happens in January each year in Vancouver. So I think when we start doing that, when we start exposing our youth, not only to understanding Mining Matters, you know, through their curriculum at school, but then taking them to conferences so they can learn more. And, you know, that's how we excite them, and that's how we show them what's happening in the industry. So it is about inclusion, but it's also about being intentional. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Justin, how much time do we have left?
There's currently 3 minutes until this session ends. If you'd like to do wrap-ups, this actually might be a good thing. And I saved our Brockland acknowledgement for this purpose because there is such a wide tapestry. So I'll read the one that we feel proud to acknowledge. Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to work and live in our area today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish and One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And it's a gathering place for many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that the great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. It's wonderful to hear them from different sections, and I'm really glad that we could all get them in one spot today. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to wrap up here. You know, one of the messages that I heard loud and clear is that we need to build the relationship with the communities. And that relationship begins with a visit by the proponents to the communities directly. And through that relationship building, we will influence those young people to look at our sector, the mining sector, as a possible vocation for the future, whether it's at the trades stage or the professional engineering or geoscience areas. There are opportunities for our community youth to find meaningful work within the sector. And I would like to finish off by thanking our panelists for their thoughtful and poignant comments. And that I also want, given that we just finished the National Day of Reconciliation, I want people to think about that it isn't one day a year that we think about those people who have survived, and for those who didn't survive, the residential institutions that were in place here in Canada for Indigenous people, that we are still remembering that. It's 365 days a year that this is an important subject matter for us in recovering that through that legacy.